now more than ever, people need to go within and plug into that cellular memory, plug into divine source, detach as much as possible from the matrix. A lot of these people that have all these abilities, who have celestial star ancestry, they're operating not only throughout this cosmos, but in higher planes, and they're working against the Draco Empire. The photonic energy and the cosmic rays will activate our higher centers. And it's incumbent upon us to ride that frequency wave. Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you are listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Today, my very special guest is Jorge Martin. Jorge Martin is a journalist and UFO researcher, was born in New York City in 1952 from Puerto Rican parents. His family returned to Puerto Rico when he was 5 years old with studies in political sciences at the University of Puerto Rico. He began his work of investigative journalism, specializing in the enigma of unidentified flying objects and the alleged extraterrestrial presence in our world in year 1975. Since then, he has investigated hundreds of cases and incidents related to this matter, both in Puerto Rico as well as abroad, becoming an expert in the field with international prestige. His works have been published in Puerto Rico, the United States, England, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Japan, China, Romania, Russia, Poland, Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and other nations. Martin has represented Puerto Rico in several UFO conferences, congresses, and symposiums in the USA, England, and Germany, and in South American countries such as Brazil and Ecuador. He has participated as a consultant in the production of TV programs and documentaries related to the UFO alien issue and its impact on Puerto Rico for the Discovery Channel, the Learning Channel, and programs such as Explorer of National Geographic, Unsolved Mysteries, Strange Universe, and TV special programs from Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and of course Puerto Rican television specials. He produced several radio programs on the UFO alien subject in Puerto Rico and is the author of the book The Lazar Report, Project E.B.A.s, Taken in the Light, Vieques, Shooting Range of the Third Kind, Portal to Other Worlds, El Yunque, and he is currently writing two other important books pertaining to the UFO extraterrestrial reality in Puerto Rico. Martin has been editor of Puerto Rican magazines Enigma, UFO Evidence, Milenio X, and currently he is editor of Enigmas del Milenio magazine. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Jorge Martin. How are you, Jorge?
Hi, James. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
It's my pleasure, Jorge. I saw you many years ago at the International UFO Congress. The late, great Bob Brown started the International UFO Congress, and I saw you give a presentation there many years ago, and I was just astounded at all the things that were going on in Puerto Rico. A lot of my research colleagues made the trip to Puerto Rico to conduct their own investigations.
That's correct.
So you have the floor. What are the subjects uppermost in your mind that you would like to bring to the attention of my listeners as to what's currently going on in Puerto Rico?
Well, Puerto Rico has always been a site of a lot of UFO and alien activity, as well as other type of phenomena, Right now, the UFO phenomenon is the main type of activity we are having, but recently there have been other types of things happening here, which seem to imply that wormholes or portals are opening in the sky all over Puerto Rico, from which UFOs emerge into our atmosphere. There are already several pictures, photographs taken by witnesses, and many people have seen this type of phenomena happen in different parts of the island. So I think those are the main type of events in Puerto Rico.
I'm aware of some of this wormhole phenomenon myself. I've investigated cases where the sky seemed to open up at a given point and craft would fly in or out.
Correct.
That's what the people are reporting over there.
Yes, the same thing. In some cases, as I told you already, people have taken photographs. At first, they didn't know what they were photographing, because it was very high in the atmosphere, and the image was small. But once you amplified the image, you saw what was there, and it was very weird. At first, people thought that this could have been a flying saucer type craft high in the atmosphere, because there was something white on top of the shape that was being observed there. They believed these were some type of domes or something that this object had. But when we amplified the pictures, it became obvious that it had nothing to do with a UFO. It looked like a dark opening in the sky with what seemed to be like vaporous clouds, both on the upper part and below it. When we worked these images out with the digital filters and checked them with different filters, such as a solarization filter to invert the image to the negative and then invert it back with the normal colors, we found out that these were openings in the sky. Okay, if you work this with the fine edges digital filter, it became obvious that it was some type of opening with a tunnel-like structure. Okay, and some kind of a cloud or vapor in the upper and lower part of the opening, which implied to me that whatever this tunnel in the sky was issuing out such a large amount of heat that it reacted with the atmosphere, with the moisture in the atmosphere, and created these vapor-like clouds all around it. But the surprising thing was that UFOs, in some cases these are oval-shaped UFOs, and in other cases these are cylinder-like shapes of UFOs coming out from these objects. These are being photographed both by night and in broad daylight.
Does it seem to you that one of the big issues that's going on in Puerto Rico, always has been the case, is the long-standing military involvement and knowledge of the ET phenomenon? Does the military seem to be aware of the wormholes that are appearing in the skies of Puerto Rico?
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are aware of it. Because, for example, we have these pictures taken in the town of Aguadilla. That is in the northwestern tip of Puerto Rico. There is an office with different type of systems, radar systems, etc., Doppler systems of the Homeland Security. Also, there's a station of the U.S. Coast Guard. You know, this recent case in which the Coast Guard videotaped a UFO that came out from the ocean and flew around the area being chased by this jet airplane of the United States Coast Guard. Have you seen this video?
No, I have not.
Okay, I'll send you a copy of it after.
Oh, thank you. We'll put it up on the website.
Okay, one source of mine in the Coast Guard there gave me a copy as soon as this happened. Gave me a copy of the video that was taken by this aircraft from the U.S. Coast Guard, and I made it public. The thing is that there also the U.S. Air Force has a facility, like an observatory, to study the sun, and it is very difficult for me to accept that with all this equipment and all this work they are doing there, they are not aware that these things are happening there. Okay, one of the best images we have that have been taken by witnesses in that area came precisely from the area of Aguadilla, and you can see the opening in the sky from which two luminous objects are coming out at both edges, at the right side and the left side, from this opening into the sky. I don't know if you have seen the images, but I sent you copies of them too.
Thank you very much. That's fascinating. And as far as the military connection is concerned, what we learned years ago from you and your colleagues was that there has been this long-standing military knowledge and military involvement in the UFO alien situation there. And there are certain key areas of Puerto Rico, like El Yunque Forest, Cabo Rojo, which, like El Yunque, seems to be the site of a large alien underground base and maybe even an interdimensional portal area. Can you elaborate on what's been going on in El Yunque?
Okay, there are several places here in the island where this heavy activity is observed. One of them, as you have just mentioned, is the Yunque rainforest. It's a tropical rainforest here in Puerto Rico to the east of the island, in a forest which is right now under the control of the U.S. government and the U.S. Forestry Service. That place has been a site of a lot of UFO action, encounters with aliens, with this very strange type of creatures for many years. I have cases that go as long back as 1934 from people who lived in that area, who have observed all these type of phenomena for decades. More recently, from the 60s and 70s up to now, Well, it must obvious what people were watching, no? Before that, people used to believe that due to superstitious ideas and the religion of Puerto Ricans, that maybe these were some type of demons or whatever that was going on, demon activity in the area. But afterwards, with more knowledge about the UFO phenomenon, they became aware that they were observing flying saucer type craft and huge cylinders going into the area and out from the area. And they had a lot of encounters with these small humanoid creatures, which are commonly called the so-called grays, okay? Another type of apparent aliens, both gray-like, same about 6 or 7 different types with more or less the same type of characteristics, physical characteristics, I would say, but some slight differences in color, etc. And also some human-like beings that people think are aliens, okay? Very tall albinos-like men, reddish eyes, very white hair. Other that look very much like an American, but or a Nordic individual with short, yellow, bright hair and dressed in these old tight-fitting coveralls. They have been observed close to the craft, flying saucer type craft. There are places there that open, and I know this will interest you, James. There are actually a place there in the rainforest between some important mountains there. Yunque Mountain, Mount Britain Mountain, and El Cacique Mountain. There's a deep ravine there that Forestry Service personnel, policemen, and other people in the area have seen. When this deep area there seems to disappear, it becomes brightly illuminated by a reddish, orangish, pinkish light, and the whole area, the whole terrain, the trees, the land, everything disappears, and they see very down deep underground what seems to be a big city with very small buildings down there, very bright with lights, etc. And from there, people have observed UFOs coming out from or going into. And another, I have some Forestry Service personnel who have seen when this happens, small gray type creatures that run into the place or come out from the place. So as you can see, the activity is very strong. And I believe that this is what made the U.S. government to decide recently to control completely the whole area. It was placed on the total federal jurisdiction and control. And even though it is allegedly a public place, in many occasions when people try to get to certain areas there, they are stopped by military people who are not supposed to be there. Okay, military personnel, and who take the people out from the places and from the rainforest.
Have there been reports of individuals taken by the ETs into that or similar underground bases?
Well, not directly the ETs. Okay, that has happened in other places of Puerto Rico. But in the rainforest, what happens mostly is that people have encounters with these creatures. Okay, they can see a huge flying saucer type craft overhead in the forest, and many of these creatures, multiple creatures, these are multiple creatures encounters. Okay, we have several of these cases there. People are either camping there, or they are groups of Boy Scouts or other people who are there doing some type of activity, and all of a sudden, mostly by night, this happens mostly by night, James, this craft appears, and people feel these sounds around them. When they look around, they see that they are surrounded by between 25, 30, 50 of these creatures, okay, that just remain surrounding them and looking at them, doing a strange garbling sound, because witnesses in Puerto Rico have described, James, that in many occasions when these creatures verbalize with their talking system, whatever, you can hear like a garbling sound, okay, like a recording going very fast. But when they communicate telepathically, you can understand them completely, okay. Mostly on these occasions, what these creatures do is that they surround the witnesses, doing like a waving motion and doing these strange sounds. Afterwards, they leave the area, they disappear. There are several of these cases there, and also encounters with other type of creatures, somewhat like the so-called Bigfoot type creatures, but not exactly the same type of description. Okay, I can tell you that what has happened is that in some cases, military personnel, okay, have spoken confidentially about an alleged Area 51 type installation, a small type of Area 51 type of installation that allegedly is inside some of the mountains, one of the mountains in the rainforest, okay? And the studies and maybe even contact is being made there by the U.S. forces, U.S. Military forces, and intelligence community.
Was the source suggesting or implying that the base may be a joint base between humans and ETs, military and ETs?
I can't say for sure if that's the case, but I can't rule it out either. There have been some cases in which people, policemen, I have this case of a high-level policeman and one of his companions who were ordered to give escort to some agents that came from the United States. I don't know if it was the CIA or something like that, but they were ordered to go to the Puerto Rico National Guard base in the airport in Carolina, Luis Muñoz Marine International Airport, and pick up these two gentlemen, American agents. They contacted other people who had a small truck with them. They had to board this truck, and the Puerto Rican policeman, the officer and his companion, had to escort them up to the rainforest. They went all the way up to the rainforest, took a detour in a road there that allegedly does not exist to the left in the rainforest, and eventually they came in front of a house that seemed to be some type of facility for the Forest Service personnel, like a cabin, a big cabin. They were ordered to stay in their car, waiting for this gentleman to come out from that building. When they did come out, they were surprised, because these two gentlemen, the agents, came out holding a very strange type of creature in their hands. What they described to me was something like a gray type creature, okay? They had a container like the ones that are used in the transport things in the flights, airplane flights, and they put this creature inside of that, and it sealed itself, making a hissing sound like it closing itself and creating a airless compartment, and put the case into the truck and went back to the Air National Guard Airport in San Juan. And after that, they left in a plane that had come from the United States. The policeman, this lieutenant, and his friend don't know, they can't understand why they were ordered to do this and allowed to see this. They never understood why that happened, why they were allowed to see this happen, how they had this creature in their hands and put it there and take it away. But we have another case in which, for example, Carlos Perez, the brother of a very known comedian here in Puerto Rico, Silverio Perez, was with some friends up there in Mount Britain Mountain one night about 5 years ago. They were in the tower, seeing the area. They wanted to show the area to a friend of them. And as they were coming down, all of a sudden, they noticed something like a movement next to them in the trail. They were coming down and all of a sudden, this group of military men jumped out, okay, from the ground, totally surrounded with this net-like things over their bodies with leaves and etc., and like camouflage, like sharpshooters when they camouflage themselves, and they were armed and pointed their arms to them, asking them who they were, what were they doing there, and to identify themselves. They identified themselves. They took their IDs, communicated with someone, and ordered them to leave the area at once. But at that moment, they noticed a movement to the right next to the soldiers, and they were surprised at what they saw. They saw something like a child stand up from the ground, okay? But what they saw had a very big head, was very skinny, large arms, and at that moment, the soldiers jumped on this child that they believed they were observing, and put the net over them, net with leaves and, camouflage, etc., put it on the ground, and they did as if they had not seen anything, because they were afraid that if these military people knew that they had seen that, maybe they wouldn't let them go. So they obeyed their orders and went down the trail as fast as they could and left the place. But as you can see, one of these incidents implied that there seems to be some type of action against these creatures there, but other type of things seem to imply that they are doing something together with these creatures. Either they had captured these creatures, the soldiers that stopped Carlos Perez and his friends, or they were escorting it. So as you can see, it's very difficult to say for sure what is going on there.
In some of the research you presented in the past, the U.S. Navy seemed to play a key role. They have the air station there at Roosevelt Roads, what they call Rosie Roads. And I remember the story you told years ago where hundreds of people on the ground witnessed two Navy F-14 Tomcats having an encounter with a very large ET craft and then the planes disappearing. Do you remember that story?
Yes, that happened in December 28, 1988. At 7:30 p.m. in the night, in Christmas time.
If I remember correctly, there was an exchange afterwards. The personnel were returned. Is that what happened?
Well, there's something, not much is known about that, but let me tell you the story. As you already mentioned, that area of Puerto Rico in Cabo Rojo, that is the southwest region of the island, has always been another site of heavy UFO and alien activity. All the time, for many decades, the residents of that area, citizens, they have seen UFOs come out from the sea, going into the sea, overflying the area. They have seen landings. They have had many encounters with alien beings, both human-like and drake-like creatures. Many incidents. But in 1987, something happened there in Cabo Rojo and Lajas. These two towns are very close to each other. They're in the southwest. There is the famous Laguna Cartagena. I know you must have heard about it. Okay.
Yes.
It is a lagoon from which many UFOs are seen coming out from, many encounters with aliens there, etc., etc. But the thing is that in 1987, on July 1st, 1987, at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, there was a loud explosion that seemed to come from underground, right in that area. Big quake. A big tremor was felt all over the southwestern region of Puerto Rico. The thing is, that night, after that happened, people saw very bright cobalt color blue sky, smoke, coming out from the lagoon and other places, and some cracks that had appeared in the ground in the whole region. And then afterwards, that night, many UFOs coming down, shaking the lagoon, huge cylinder-type crafts flying over the area, from which smaller UFOs came out, flying saucer-type craft. A very strong UFO wave began at that time and has continued up to now. Well, the thing is that in December 28 of 1988, people heard these jets flying overhead in their communities of Lajas and Cabo Rojo, and they looked out. They went out because whenever they heard these jets flying over the area, they knew that something was happening, okay, because they were accustomed already to see a flying saucer being chased by jets from the U.S. Navy or the Puerto Rico National Guard. So they went out and they were surprised to see this really huge triangle-shaped craft, okay, with a big ball of yellow light in the center on the underside and red lights on the different edges, of the triangle, the different points of the triangle. Two jets seem to be trying to intercept this huge craft there. One of them, the craft, continue moving to the west, next to a radio station antenna there in Cuesta Blanca sector, and one of the jets approached the object, the triangle-shaped craft, from the back. When it was very close to it, it just disappeared in the air. It vanished suddenly. Okay, people began screaming because they believed that when they saw the jet approaching so near to the object, there would be a collision and maybe an explosion. But instead, it just disappeared, it vanished. Then the object flew back again, make a V-turn, an angle turn, and suspended itself at about 150 feet from the Laguna Cartagena, over the palm trees there. And another jet came, and as it approached the object, it also disappeared. Then the triangle-shaped craft emitted a very bright flash of light, an explosion of light with no sound, and divided itself into two different sections. One of the sections, engulfing red light, flew to the east, and the other one to the north, okay, over the mountains of Monte del Estado, small ridge mountains there. And apparently there was another jet that we believe was taking footage of what's happening with the other jets, because it remained at a distance, and as it approached the craft, before it splitting into two, it emitted 3 balls of red light that chased the third jet aircraft, the F-14. That's what the people describe, F-14 from the U.S. Navy, Tomcats. And the F-14 flew away to the north, being chased by these balls of red light, and we don't know what happened. We have some people who live in the area of close to El Yunque rainforest, okay, in Canóvanas, in a very high mountainside there, and they told me something that surprised me. That was the event of the jet fighters in Cabo Rojo and Lajas was in December 28, 1988, but by the middle of January 1989, these people saw from their vantage point of view, this very, very high point of view in Canóvanas, they saw that in a sector close to the radar system that the U.S. Navy had in Pico del Este mountain in the rainforest, there was this huge triangle-shaped craft that they described, and it was similar to the one that had been observed in Cabo Rojo and Lajas, the night of the jet disappearances. And it seemed to land, not exactly land, but, suspend itself very close to the ground in that area. So we don't know what happened on that occasion, but we tend to believe that either they were returning the pilots of this jet aircraft that disappeared, or something was going on, maybe pertaining to some type of talks between whoever was in that craft, large craft, and the U.S. military in the radar systems area. So we don't know for sure, but the fact is that this huge triangle-shaped craft was observed next to the radar facilities there.
That's a fascinating story, Jorge. Also about the U.S. Navy, a similar vein, about Vieques Island, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mm-hmm. The cover story they put out, if memory serves, was that the Navy had to take over Vieques Island because they needed it for a gunnery range, and this necessitated moving out all of the citizens and basically taking it over. But according to your sources and the research that you've done, it turns out that the U.S. Navy has an entirely different agenda for Vieques Island. Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, but before that, James, let me tell you this. The U.S. Navy, as you say, has been very involved with the UFO situation here in the island of Puerto Rico. But also the U.S. Air Force and the Puerto Rico National Guard and the U.S. Army that tend to be together. And the U.S. Army base here is Buchanan Base in Guaynabo, in the San Juan metropolitan area. The U.S. Navy has been involved in many of the events that have been happening here. Back in 1984, there was a UFO crash there in the rainforest. Okay, that was in February 1984, at 7:30, 8 p.m. in the night. Many people saw this thing flying very fast all over Puerto Rico, doing angled turns, and eventually it crashed there at a mountainside next to the Yunque mountain. There was a cover-up. Okay, we have published in the book we published, the Yunque, Portal to Other Worlds. We cover much of the story, much of the things that were told to us by an internal source that participated in the recovery of the pieces of this craft and the alien carcasses, the alien cadavers that were found at a site next to the radar system in Pico del Este. Afterwards, there was another incident back in 1987, between March and April 1987, and this was told to us by a high-level security intelligence officer here in Puerto Rico. He used to work there. I made contact with him through a common friend of ours, and he's claiming that in that day between March and April 1987, an alien type flying saucer type craft had landed there in the forest and had been captured by military forces from the U.S. Navy from Rooster Rose Naval Station. So as you can see, the Navy always seems to be involved with this. And he also explained that this craft, in the first case, the remains of the craft, etc., were taken to the Rooster Rose Naval Station, and from there they were sent to the U.S., somewhere to the U.S. to be studied. But in this occasion, in 1987, he told us that this other craft that had been captured there was taken to an underground facility that was built there in the rainforest, where they had been studying the craft by high-level scientists from the United States, maybe doing some type of back engineering. You know, the thing is that, as you can see, the Navy is always involved in these type of cases. Pertaining to the situation in Vieques, let me explain to your audience what happens with Vieques. Vieques is an island that belongs to the territory of Puerto Rico. It is part of the territory of Puerto Rico, and it's located east from the main island, east from the area where the Yunque rainforest is located at. Okay, in 1941, 1942, by those days, the U.S. Navy decided they needed the island as a coal facilitator, you know, for their ships, and also to do some practices, military practices, bombing practices, etc., etc., etc. The thing is that the island was taken over by the U.S. Navy, and the population had to live in a very narrow part of the island in the center of the island. And both the east part of the island as the west part of the island were turned into U.S. bases. Eastern part of the island was totally restricted to everyone but U.S. Navy personnel, and it was used to do military practices, military exercises and bombing exercises, target practices, etc., and experimentation with new types of weapons, etc. Eventually, this grew up into creating a lot of contamination in the island, and a protest began to emerge because many things happened there that the people were not in accord with anymore. In 1999, there was an accident there when one of the U.S. jets that was doing some bombing at the target price area in the east of the island that was restricted fell at a point it shouldn't have fell and killed some people there, including the Vieques civilian guard, David Sanes. This immediately originated a protest, and all Puerto Ricans began asking for the U.S. Navy to leave Vieques alone, leave the island, etc., etc. Eventually, that is what's happened, okay? The Navy had to leave the area. But due to what happened there, we began checking on the situation, and we found that all the information that both the U.S. Navy and the Puerto Rican government, the U.S. government were giving about what happened there, this accident and everything, was, how can I say, was very ambiguous. And we have already learned that when the authorities here, or the U.S. authorities or military authorities, are very ambiguous in saying something that has happened, in many occasions the UFO matter seems to be involved. Okay, one way or the other. Okay, also when airplanes disappear in our area and ships and that, you know, the UFO phenomenon seems to be involved. Okay, so we went to Vieques, my wife and I, and began doing some check-ins with the people and interviewing people. At first, they were very reluctant to talk about whatever they had seen or knew because of all the problems they had had with the U.S. Navy, and they didn't trust very much anyone who went there to make some questions about it. But eventually, they began talking, and we were very surprised by the amount of information we got pertaining to an apparent U.S. Navy alien contact program. The amount of information they are given to us by the fishermen of the island of Vieques, by the policemen, the state police from Vieques, the municipal police, the people in the municipal government, the residents, the citizens of Vieques, about the encounter, the many encounters they had had with aliens, great type aliens, both in the lagoons and in the areas where the U.S. Navy was doing these experiments and bombings, at the U.S. Navy bases, We were told by people who work in security in this restricted area where the bombings were being made, the target practices. They talked to us about how in many occasions they saw these huge, but really huge flying saucer type craft coming down from the sky, engulfing light and suspending themselves at about 6 feet high from some of the lagoons in the eastern part of the island of Vieques, the area that was completely restricted due to the target practices there and the military exercises. And we became aware that the U.S. Navy was using the exercises as an excuse, as a disguise for what they were really doing there. Even though they were using the area for military practices, they apparently were also using it to do some type of contact with these crafts and whoever was in this craft. This guard told us, and military personnel who were there, that whenever that happened and this craft came down from the sky and landed at the other side of the bombing site, they were ordered immediately by the high-level officials that were there to leave the place at once. Both the Puerto Rican guards, the security guards, and low-level U.S. Army personnel had to leave the area at once. Only these high-level officers remained there doing whatever it was that they were doing with whoever was in those craft because they couldn't see anything more. But that happened on several occasions, and as I told you, there were many encounters with this small type of beings in the area. In many occasions, the southern part of the island, in Esperanza sector, the citizens have seen, and the fishermen there, when these creatures, gray-like creatures, come out from the water, from the sea, okay, and run into the lagoons and disappear underwater in the lagoons. Or they do the opposite. They come out from the lagoons and run to the sea and disappear. And they see this craft also descending into these lagoons in Vieques. So as you can see, the panorama is very surprising. And I have no doubt when I say that the U.S. Navy seemed to have some type of contact program or was involved directly in some type of research that had to do with the UFOs and the aliens there.
Seems like they have been aware of this phenomenon there for some time.
Yes.
Some of the accounts I read, generations of fishermen talk about the craft flying in and out of the ocean in Cabo Rojo and other places. So the locals seem to know that this phenomenon, this alien presence, has been in their midst for centuries.
Yes. At first, the people in Vieques believed that this had something to do with the U.S. Navy. That maybe the Navy was doing some type of test of some new type of aeronautic prototypes, weapons, etc. But after some time, they realized that it had nothing to do with them when they began seeing these alien creatures in many occasions. And in some occasions, they saw this huge flying saucer type craft close to their boats, absorbing water from the sea. And these columns of water that were circling upwards and disappearing into the crafts. And many such incidents there.
What are some of the people saying that are having encounters with ETs? Are the people receiving information from the ETs? Are they being told or shown things by the ETs?
Well, in the rainforest, most of the things that happen are just common encounters, okay? You can be either walking in the lanes in the forest or maybe camping, and these creatures would come out and get close to you, look at you. In most occasions, they won't talk to you. They just allow themselves to be seen by the people and observe people with a lot of curiosity, and then they leave. But in other cases, in other parts of Puerto Rico, in the island, the same thing happened in Vieques. Okay, they don't talk to the people, etc., but they allow themselves to be observed by the people. They get real close to the people. But if the people try to get closer to them, they remain about 4 feet 6 away from the person. But if the person tries to get closer to them, they just leave very fast. They are very fast. The witnesses always say the same thing. They are very, very fast when they move. They were doing angle turns, movements, and jumps, and disappear very fast, either inside the crafts or into the sea, or in the lagoons, etc. In other parts of Puerto Rico, the same thing happened in Cabo Rojo, in Aguadilla, as I said before. There have been many cases. Many people don't know this, but there have been many such cases in the area of the Arecibo Radio Observatory. Okay? Large craft have been observed on top of the radar system there, of the antenna. Both flying saucer type craft and cylinder-shaped craft of large size, and also some metallic spheres, okay, silvery-looking metallic spheres that have been observed on many occasions, flying around the antenna in the radio observatory. If you talk to the security guards there, they'll tell you many of the things they have observed there.
And the people that have reported these incidents, or may not necessarily reported them, but have experienced them, have any of them reported being confronted or approached later on by the military or the police and told not to talk about what they've seen and been intimidated?
Well, not really, okay? Those type of stories are very rare, okay? We don't have cases in where the U.S. government or agents threaten the witnesses. They prefer not to say anything about it. If they do anything, they would be, accepting that what's going on is real, and they don't want to do that. Also, before, let me tell you this. You asked me if these creatures, these aliens, communicate with the people. In some cases, they have to do with abductions, okay, or contacts in other places. There have been communications, okay. We have many cases in which people have been abducted from their homes, from their rooms. They have been abducted from their cars or together with their cars. We have several such cases, and in those cases, people were examined by the aliens. In most of the cases, they were cured, healed of different ailments they had. Okay, in some cases, kidney problems, kidneys that were almost dead, cancer, and other things. Okay, high pressure level, sickness, and other things. And they tend to explain, whenever they do this, it is interesting, James, because they tend to talk in like in a spiritual manner, saying things that some might identify with some of the things that are said in the Bible or religious books, okay, and also seem to be very worried about the ecological situation of our planet. Okay, they say that we're killing ourselves, and they are here to protect us, but also to protect our planet.
And so this is the gist of some of their messages. I remember, I don't know if it's still valid or if it's still something that may come to pass, but there was an abductee or someone who was having contacts with ETs, and this individual, a man, was told that the ETs were concerned about a possible asteroid strike sometime in the not-too-distant future, and that it's going to cause some kind of global flooding event. Do you remember that?
Yes, you're talking about the Amaury Rivera case.
Yes.
Amaury is the gentleman who took some pictures of a F-14 aircraft flying around a flying saucer here in Puerto Rico, in Boquerón, in Cabo Rojo. Amaury was abducted, according to what he says, okay, to his story. He was abducted, and at this place he was taken at, there were 7 people with him that were taken that same night, and they were shown things that were going to happen in our planet by human-looking alien and several small creatures that looked like more or less like the so-called race. And they were shown images in like a hologram of things that were going to happen. And one of the things they said would happen was that a large meteorite would fall in a sector close to Puerto Rico, and that would create a catastrophe here in the island and to other places too, due to the huge tidal wave that would be created and things like that, and the tremors that would start at that moment. That most of the island would be destroyed, and other places due to the tidal waves that would run everywhere. I believe that's the case you are talking about.
Yes. I saw an interview of him on YouTube, and he was talking about the ET who was described as human-looking but very dark, and he was being told that this may be a probable outcome, that it's something that may happen in the future. And there have been other sources in Puerto Rico who talk about what seem to be preparations for like some kind of large-scale catastrophic event.
Yes, we have several cases in which this has come out. In those cases, we have used a hypnotic regression work with this case because the witnesses didn't remember everything that had transpired when they had the experience. They were taken together with their car. The interesting thing is that these are multiple witnesses cases, okay? In the car were 2 people together or 3 people together, things like that. And they were subjected to hypnosis and taken back to see what really happened and when they experienced this. And they say more or less the same thing, even though they don't talk about, the beings don't tell them about a large meteorite is going to happen, but they tend to say that something big is going to happen, some type of catastrophe that will happen because of our behavior, what we're doing with the environment here, and with our way of doing things on this planet. And they are working, trying to get samples of all type of life from planet Earth in order to repopulate the planet in case this that they are foreseeing happens. And they always call for the human beings to take a spiritual lane instead of the materialistic lane that we have taken for so many years ago, warning that this has happened already on 3 different occasions before in man's history, that we have destroyed our civilization in 3 different occasions, and it's going to happen again. And we'll have to begin anew to rise up in a new civilization if this happens. That the only way to prevent this is to be more spiritual in our way of being and less materialistic.
Yes, that is something that we need to take to heart because time is running out. The state of the ecology of this planet is going downhill rapidly. I'm sorry?
I agree with you on that.
Yes. In the few minutes we got left in the first hour, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? In the second hour, I'd like you to talk about more about the chupacabra, because that was a story that really emerged into our consciousness 10, 15 years ago. We haven't really heard much since then, but I'm sure the chupacabra are still around. And also we can talk about other things such as the Fort Chaffee incident in the second hour. But in the time we got left in the first hour, is there anything else you wanted to comment upon?
Well, we can talk about what's going on currently in different places of Puerto Rico.
Yes, please.
For example, there in Aguadilla, we have cases that I didn't know about until recently of contacts, encounters in the what used to be the U.S. Air Force base there. That is now a private sector where the Homeland Security office is located at, and the Coast Guard. But there are also now a Puerto Rican airport there in what used to be a military airport. And I've recently come to the knowledge that there had been several encounter cases there that were not known because the people who have experienced this had never talked about it. But now we know that there have been encounters of craft that had landed there next to the airport, and from which tall, gray-type-like creatures came out from. They made contact with people, and they were trying to, by signs, doing gestures, etc., trying to apparently tell them something, to check something on the ground in that area. I believe that maybe it has to do with something military that worries these beings. But they do always the same thing. They come out and point to the people, point to them, and then point down to the earth, as saying, "Look down there." Okay, but people don't understand. I get the idea because of other things that I have been checking here in Puerto Rico, that maybe something is going on down there that worries these creatures.
Yes, like there's some kind of military testing or some kind of project going on that may cause problems. Yes.
Uh-huh. Many people have had encounters there with both gray type creatures and tall Nordic type beings, okay, with long hair and dressed with tunics, white tunics, bright light white tunics. These blonde hair aliens have talked. These are being fishermen who have had these experiences there, and such as the Cataquet case, Inocencio Cataquet, one of the fishermen there. And he was told by these beings that they were doing some type of experimentations there in the area, and that their specific line of work had to do with getting samples of the DNA of all types of marine life. Okay? That other aliens that were doing work together with them had to do with other type of species, but they were specialized in taking samples of all the marine life on the planet in case something happens, like I told you before. So they can repopulate the planet with the different species that they have taken samples from.
We've heard this from other alien contact stories. Betty Andreessen, in her book, The Watchers, she talks about how she was inside of a craft and she was in the presence of a gray-looking being, and the gray-looking being was working with these plants. And the alien told her telepathically that for thousands of years, that species of ET had been collecting every form of plant on the planet in order to one day preserve it in case something happened. Mm-hmm. So we've heard this from other people too.
Yes, something more or less the same thing.
Do they ever report cattle mutilations or any?
Yes,
that's still happening over there.
There have been cattle mutilations. They still happen from time to time. Not very frequently, but it happens from time to time. As well as the so-called chupacabra or anomalous biological entities, as I also call them. From time to time, they keep appearing and doing some things, but right now, the situation pertaining to this type of creatures have been more calm. Okay.
Do you get a lot of reports of the ET activity in neighboring places like the Dominican Republic?
Not much.
Not much.
Years ago, we used to. Okay, since the 80s, I haven't received much. Okay. Right now in Puerto Rico, there's a cover-up in all these type of things, these items. I believe that when we publicize what we have found in Vieques and the connection with the U.S. Navy, etc., and the rainforest situation, someone was very worried. And the media here now is very controlled on these matters, okay? They seldom discuss anything. They have declared us a blackball. You know what I mean?
Yes. And it seems that, and this is just conjecture on my part, but because of the special status Puerto Rico has in the American scheme of things,
yes,
it's almost like they've been able to isolate it from the rest of the mainland,
yes,
and basically do whatever they want. And that's why they don't even bother to intimidate the witnesses over there, because they know they can keep everything under wraps.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a couple of cases where they exerted some pressure on some witnesses, okay, but not really threaten them and things like that. And the FBI and the federal agencies here have a lot of power, okay, about Puerto Rican affairs. People feel a little intimidated, okay, in some cases. But right now, as I tell you, the media is very controlled related to these matters. There are a couple of individuals here, this happens everywhere, who are shown as experts in the matter, but are really detractors, okay?
Yes.
Debunkers, okay? And they begin to make jokes about the witnesses, so people prefer to shut up and not talk much about what they have been seeing and experiencing.
Yes, that's how they do it. They create these experts in all these UFO hotspots around the world, but they're really debunkers and gatekeepers, and
that's correct.
They're there just to keep a lid on everything. Well, we've reached the end of the first hour. You've been listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Our very special guest, Jorge Martin, has been talking about the UFO alien military activity on Puerto Rico, and we're just getting started. We have a whole lot more information in the second hour. If you like what we do, if you support what we do here on the Cosmic Switchboard Show, please go to thecosmicswitchboard.com, subscribe, and become a member. And we will see you at the top of the next hour. We'll be right back. Because this is a frequency war.